So, many people still claim that the legacy version of DayZ is still better than the current one. I still play on the alpha time to time and I still enjoy it, but is it really better than the new DayZ? I've had the idea of making a legacy review for quite a while now, and I think it's time to make one. So, are these claims still relevant? Is pre-63 DayZ still better after 3 years since it dropped for the first time? Well, today I'm gonna jump back into the legacy version of the game and review its last version, 0.62. But just before that, just a small disclaimer. Don't ask me how I can still play on this version. All I'm gonna say is that I kept a backup of the last legacy version before it got updated to 0.63. But I will not tell you how I can still play on multiplayer. You can do your own research, however, I do not recommend you to try it. But if you do, I won't be responsible if you fuck up something. That being said, let's get into it. This brings back memories, right? The good old menu, with the alpha disclaimer and the birds singing in the background. It's nostalgic for sure. Let's start by checking the setting menu. At first sight, it's honestly not that bad. Everything is pretty easy to understand and you have plenty of options to fit your need. But where it gets a bit more problematic is in the control tab. It's kind of a clusterfuck. Whilst I like the fact that you have a lot of freedom regarding keybinds customization, it's just too messy and complicated to bind something. You have to click on the action you want to change, remove the old key binded to it, click on add, press the key you want to set, click apply, and then click apply a second time, otherwise it won't save what you've done and you have to restart everything. You get the hang of it fairly quickly, but I still remember back in 2015 when I played DayZ for the first time. I was so confused and I didn't understand what I was doing. I'm glad that it's much more clean and easier now. Though I would not mind to add back the categories just to filter some actions out, so you don't have to scroll all the way down to find a specific action to bind. There's also a problem if you didn't play the game in English language, is that you couldn't change the video memory capacity in the video tab for some reason, resulting in bad performances sometimes. And on higher resolutions than 1080p, some menus will be pretty small, but I can forgive that, it's not much of a big deal. Alright, now that we've configured the game, it's time to play. The server menu didn't change much over time. Other than the look, it's pretty much the same. It's a bit less clean, but I don't really mind it. It doesn't even look that bad. And everything was working pretty well. The queue system had already been implemented in 0.61. You can add a server to your favorite. Yeah, I don't really have much to say. It's honestly not bad. Alright, so, time to join a server. Let's see how much the game has changed. The first difference you'll notice is how clean the UI is. There is no status icon, no stamina bar or anything. Just a crosshair and small messages at the bottom left of your screen giving you indications of your character status. And the same goes for when you have a gun. There is nothing that tells you how many bullets you have left in the magazine or anything. I honestly miss that a lot. Sure, you can just hold tilde on 1.0 and it will remove everything. But the fact that you have to open your inventory that forces you to slow walk just to check your status is sometimes annoying. But at least you have the choice, so that's cool. Even though it still puts you at a disadvantage compared to other players who still have the inventory on. But this year, the devs have planned to improve feedback on the state of the character. This could include states like bleeding, hunger, thirst, and more through post-processed sounds, effects, and particles. So that's kinda cool because you won't need visual status icons anymore. Now, what about the controls? Well, they're clunky. Like, very clunky. But I'm gonna be honest here, I kinda like it. I don't like how arcade-ish 1.0 is, and I think movements are way too quick and they don't feel realistic at all. Here, it's the complete opposite. It's heavy and it's slow. I could even say that it's somewhat a bad version of EFT, and to me Tarkov have some of the best movements of any shooters. We also have much more freedom now regarding movements. Remember, there was no vaulting, you couldn't lie on your back, you couldn't aim more than a 45 degrees angle, which made it impossible sometimes to kill someone that's upstairs or above you, and you couldn't move while eating or drinking. Not even mentioning how hard it was to cancel the animation in case of emergency, by the way. And some stuff regarding animations were also kind of bad sometimes, like the reloading animations were sometimes approximative, and the sprinting animation was kind of weird and snapping every 2 seconds. And a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, like I said, I'd like the current movements to feel much heavier and slower than they are now. Make a mix of both versions will make it feel so much more realistic, and it will bring back that heaviness. Though, on a more positive side, back then you could do that supporting thing to avoid bullets. And thankfully, inertia has been added and you can't do it anymore. And a lot of animations have also been added. To give you an idea, there was not even an animation when you rotated your character. It was just spinning and it looked kinda bad. Another thing that people also seem to have forgot is that you were being slowed down when climbing up or down a steep hill. Now, I can already see people complaining about it, and yeah, I know, the way it's done is very clunky and binary, and I don't like it either. However, I don't like players being able to sprint up an 80 degrees angle terrain either. In my opinion, the steeper the hill, the slower you should get. But in an increasing way, not a sudden way like it is in 6.2. So again, just mix the two and I think it will make it better in overhaul. You will also notice how different the inventory looks like. Items are much smaller than they are now, and not only you cannot rotate items, but combining them wasn't as easy and smooth as it is now. You had to drag and drop an item to another one, then a prompt will appear and you'll have to click on combine or swap if you want to switch items. It really is unpractical, especially when you take account that when the server was laggy, you had to wait for the prompt to display the combine or swap option. On the more positive side, I prefer that you kinda had to choose what you wanna carry. See, there isn't that many slots. Some shirts don't even have slots, which makes sense. And most vests only have 2 or 4 slots max. The same goes for everything. Which, in overhaul, you cannot contain as many items as of now. And in my opinion, I do prefer it that way. One thing I want to mention though is the Raider's jacket. It only had 4 horizontal slots, which restricted what items you could carry. I wish we had that back, or at least make it like kind of EFT. You're not supposed to be able to carry a truck battery in your tactical vest. It doesn't make sense. Another thing that looks very different are the graphics and the atmosphere. When you spawn on the coast, the first thing you'll notice is how striking it is compared to now. The bluer fog makes the environment feel much more cold, and the shadow seems to be darker and more contrasted. The game seems to look a bit more colorful and saturated, and sometimes it goes to a more dark and brown tone as the weather changes. Though I would say, in some cases, I do prefer the current graphics. But the old lighting and atmosphere was better in 6.2 in my opinion. The render distance was also better in 6.2, but there wasn't any atmospheric fog which revealed the low level of details of the trees. Small detail, but some power lines were also cut. Detail that I don't recall seeing in the new version, and I think it's a neat detail, and it adds a bit more to that apocalyptic feeling. I also want to mention how Chernogorsk used to look. Here's a comparison between the old one and the new one. As you can see, everything is all packed together. Even if it wasn't the most realistic by the way things were placed, it was so good for PvP. And I miss sniping from the top of Letter Factory and getting shot from the apartments and all that stuff. It was such a great city that offered so many possibilities for dynamic gunfights, and I really miss that a lot. And let's also talk about the old Northwest Airfield. One thing a lot of people will agree on is that it was much better for PvP. And I agree. Even if I didn't like that everything was perfectly flat, there was just less stuff in general and finding players was much easier. Right now, I think there's just too much stuff and it's pretty easy to miss players and even squads. If you don't play on a 100 slot server, it can be hard to even find someone. The layout was less realistic but much simpler, and anyone who played on Legacy can tell you how long and intense some gunfights could end up being. Another small detail, but all the runway markings are missing in 1.0, and I hope we'll get them back soon. Okay, let's now talk about something else that isn't in the game anymore. It legit is one of the features that I miss the most from older versions, but it adds so much to the atmosphere and how the game looks. I'm talking about the volumetric clouds. Hang on, let me go first in the settings and re-enable them to fix them. There you go, look at them. I know it's a pretty small detail, but volumetric clouds can make such a big difference in how a game looks. Watching them getting more and more menacing as the storm approaches can really set the mood. It really changes the atmosphere and really gives a sense of scale. Do you think Red Dead Redemption 2 would look the same without them? A moment, you're riding in the plains and then a storm kicks in. And this is what you get. Compared to what we have now. Obviously, in the current version of the game, they're not present anymore. It's just a 2D skybox. And according to Samrak, the lead dev of the game, the chances of them making a comeback are close to none. Other than a small annoyance of going in the settings to re-enable them every time you start the game, I really miss them and I hope we'll get them back one day. And since we're talking about clouds, let's talk about the weather in general and how it affects your character. Well, on the downside, the storms was just a lot of rain and there wasn't much happening. There was occasionally some lightning, but without light effects or sounds like we have now. But when it rained, you'd better be ready, especially at night when it's cold. Because when you get hypothermic, you don't have very long left to survive. One day, I was driving from DayZ to the coast while being drenched, and my character started to get hypothermic. I immediately stopped and tried to make a fire, but in less than 5 minutes, I was dead. It's crazy how brutal and unforgiving the environment is. And on the opposite side, if the server time was set during summer, you could get pretty warm, even at night. And if you were not careful, you could even end up being hypothermic, which could also kill you. I don't even remember being hypothermic once in the current version of the game, other than when I worked on a fire. Though, the devs are working towards the right direction and already made huge improvements to bring back that aspect of the game over the last few months. Especially on Nomalsk, though this is not technically official as of now, but we can hope it will be at some point in the future. What about the infected now? It's a zombie game after all. Well, when you grow one, trying to avoid it is a nightmare. They will follow you wherever you go and you can't hide from them. They will keep following you even behind walls. And they also hit you from super far away and they're super laggy. It can quickly get difficult to get rid of them in certain situations. But thanks to the infinite stamina, you can just run away pretty easily. But sometimes, when you have no other choice than locking them inside the building, be prepared for some random hits and bleeds. It gets kind of annoying sometimes. One thing to notice though, is that when you have a gun, you can still use it when cornered. Your character won't raise it to the sky like an idiot. One really cool thing that I miss too, is the one hit with an axe. It's just so satisfying. Oh, and by the way, what you just saw was a Ragdoll, but we'll come back to it later. They also had an easier time with doors. For some reason, they still struggle to follow you inside the building in post 1.0. And stealth was apparently already working, as you can see. You could sneak behind a zombie and just bonk him with an axe. I didn't even know this was already a thing back then. But you can tell a lot of work has been done since. They're a lot less laggy and desyncing than before, but I still wish more work will be done to improve them. I wouldn't even be against small quick time events or some cool kill animations like in The Last of Us. Another very important feature are the cars. Alright, I'm about to trigger a lot of people by saying that, but hey, it's my review, alright? They're fucking dog shit. Like, really bad. Maybe not as bad as the current cars, but clearly not as good as most people remember. I think I had more problems and died more often on 6.2 than on the current version. Let me explain. Sometimes, when you get out of the car after a long drive, the car will teleport back to the place it got stuck during a desync between the player and the server, resulting in you losing the car and all of its content. Another bug that happened to me quite a few times is getting out of the car and getting stuck. You can't move or anything. I tried for almost an hour to get unstuck, but I had no other choice than just to kill myself. And these two bugs happened to me quite a few times over the span of just a few dozen of hours. Oh, and you want another funny bug? The more you drive, the laggier it gets. Even with a good PC, after 15 to 20 minutes of driving, the game starts to lag more and it will eventually run at less than 10 FPS. And it will stay at 10 FPS until you restart the game. So every time you did a long trip, you had to restart your game to fix the problem. Performances weren't great anyway. To give you an idea, I have an AMD 5600K coupled with a 3080 and 16 gigs of RAM. The game is installed on an NVMe and I'm still not able to reach 60 constant FPS in most of the cities. There is no doubt that a lot of optimization has been done since. Alright, let's talk guns now. That's also one of the things that got changed a lot since the game got out of alpha, and to me it's not even comparable anymore. Other than a few missing guns like the Red 9, Tactical MP133, the AUG, the RAC and a few others, we got most of them back. But anyway, I mentioned earlier about the poor quality and lack of animations when it comes to chambering a gun. And, well, that's not only it. You could even just drag and drop bullets on a magazine and reload your weapon instantly if you were doing it from inside the inventory. There was also no bad effect if you were using a damaged weapon. There were rumors saying that damaged weapons were dealing less damage, but I'm not sure if this is true or false. Disregarding that, even badly damaged weapons couldn't get jammed. And I want to talk for a second about the recoil. Holy shit, it was so good. And before I go even further on that subject, I strongly recommend you to watch this video. Some stuff has been changed and tweaked since, but it's still relevant. I'll put the link in the description. If you watched it, you can see how big of a difference there is. And still to this day, I think we're not even close to what recoil used to be. And it's not only about the recoil, it's also about the fact that the camera in 1.0 is fixed to the gun. Imagine that you attach a GoPro to your gun, and that's pretty much what it is. You can especially see it in this way that, by the way, looked so much less robotic back then. But in 6.2, you first see the rifle moving, and then your camera moves. As if the energy was being transferred over your character's body. It's such a small detail, but it makes such a big difference, and it gives so much more feedback to the player. Another really cool thing about old weapon mechanics is that you could keep aiming while cycling a protection rifle. Again, it's a small detail, but it's just one of the things that probably got forgotten or removed, and I hope we'll get it back at some point. Another aspect to the gunfight was the snapping sounds the bullets made. It was really just louder, but it made the gunfight so much more intense. Walking for hours in a vast landscape, listening to the wind and the birds, and all of a sudden... it makes your heart go to 150 in a second. And we really need to get it back into the game. Right now, I still have a hard time knowing if I'm getting shot at or not. And I hope the devs will turn up the volume of the bullet snap to what it used to be. To give you an idea, this is what getting shot at sounds like in real life. I mentioned the Ragdolls earlier, and there were rumors saying that it would come back in 2020, but it's still not there, so wait and see. Again, I know the devs are very aware of this missing feature, but we can only hope we'll get it back this year. There's nothing more satisfying to watch a guy you just killed, dropped and eat the ground. Way better than the current animations we have right now. Though, I should mention, there was also some death animations happening in certain cases in 6.2. And I hope we could at least get them back soon, just to add more variations. I also want to talk about the damage system, and more specifically, about the items in your inventory. Because yeah, when you get shot, The content in your clothes will get damaged, and the bigger the round, the more damage you will get. It's still the case in the current version, but not even close to the extent of Legacy. A Mosin bullet would ruin all of your items in your pants in a single shot. And you would also instantly lose all of your colors and maybe fall unconscious. So yeah, a bit of tweaking in the current version could bring back that feature that I also miss a lot. It really was one of the things that made the game so brutal and unforgiving back then. Alright, I think I've talked about the most important things already. Of course, there's much more I did not mention, so I've made a list of all the positives and negative things that I've experienced while playing this Legacy version. As you can see, there's many negative points I did not mention. For example, tabbing out was crashing the game most of the time, breaking your legs after a very small fall, double carrying and accidentally dropping your main weapon on the ground. Chambered bullets will disappear after every reload, resulting in losing every bullet in an SKS or Mosin. You had to rechamber all of your guns every time you logged in, and there was basically no updates. And the list goes on. It was just a buggy mess in overhaul. And I haven't even talked about the rubber banding when the server was lagging. A lot of small quality of life features were not present back then. One of them is being able to carry 2 rifles in your back, for example. You couldn't do it. But there was also some positive things that I still miss, like the ones I've mentioned in this review. And one of them is that there was no base building. And yeah, I know people will disagree on this one, but it's my opinion and I just don't like base building. I think it kinda breaks the cycle of the game. And trust me, I was one of the first who saw it coming. I played on the 420 servers back in the days, so I could try it for myself. And I built a base as a castle. It was fun for a week, but I already knew back then that it will completely change the meta in a way that I don't like. Ask yourself why the day 1 servers are so popular. It's just old school barrels and tents hidden in the woods. But yeah, other than that, well, we pretty much got our old DayZ back, I would say. We also have modding, the game is super well optimized, there is a server for every playstyle and so much more. So my opinion? Well, Legacy is kinda bad compared to what we have now. But I still like it. I guess most of that is due to nostalgia. After all, I bought the game March 1st, 2015, just over 6 years ago, and I have accumulated almost 3600 hours on it. And I still launch it time to time, just to remember the good old days and enjoy the scenery. Some people might find it weird to play DayZ on an empty server, but I kinda like it. It's kinda like playing Minecraft in single player after all, but it's me against the weather and some laggy zombies. I think DayZ made a long way since. The game was such in a bad state back then, there was barely any update, almost no communications from the devs, we were pretty much left in the dark. And when 63 came out, it was a disaster in my opinion. There was like 11 guns if I remember correctly, barely any mechanics. I think it shouldn't have been released like this. But we finally got most of the old stuff back and it's a lot less buggy and unstable. It's just better in almost every ways now. Though, I wish more would be done to get a mix of the two, like I said. But it made its way back to a very good state and it has never been so alive and with such a strong player base. I think I can finally say that 1.11, the current version as of I'm writing this review, is better than Legacy. And don't get me wrong, I keep and will keep playing on Legacy, but it's just not what people think it is. It really isn't. Most of it is due to nostalgia, I guess, but it is true though that some aspects are still better on older versions. I've made a poll a few days ago on Twitter, and thanks to the devs who retweeted it, it got exactly 2500 upvotes. And according to this poll, 1/3 of the long-term players would rather play on Legacy than on the current versions. So, what do you think? Especially after watching this video. I also want to mention that the devs said that releasing Legacy versions was not in their plans, but it is not entirely impossible. I would honestly love DayZ Classic, or at least have the server files of older versions so the community can host them and we can play on it. Again, I said that I will not tell you how I'm able to play on 6.2, but if you want to make your own opinion, or if you're one of the new players who never experienced Pre 1.0, I do recommend trying it. Again, it's at your own risk, and I don't really think it's worth it anymore, other than for nostalgia. Alright, this was my review of Legacy. I hope you enjoyed this jump back in time as much as I did. Don't expect to see many videos like this from me, so don't bother subscribe or anything. Just share the video if you liked it, and thanks for staying till the end. Much love. Actually, you can link batteries in 6.2 so it's better.